さっき俺が全部食っちまった。いや、嘘だろ。
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 10 worst video game crossovers. These were the times where no fandom was happy with the end result.
Alright, furball, what's the big idea?
Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
And where is this scientist? He's here.
On the surface, it seemed as if Marvel vs. Capcom was ready to evolve alongside modern fighting games with a new art style, new cinematic story mode, and a revert back to the original game's 2v2 format. Even though Infinite does feel good to play, everything else about it is so lackluster. Much of the roster is just ripped from MVC3, and there isn't any impact behind hits, combos, or hyper combos, and the story mode is a freaking train wreck of cringy dialogue and poorly explained plot lines. MVCI got such a bad rap from fans that it effectively killed the franchise for almost an entire decade before we got the MVC collection in 2024.
I call this baby the Infinity Buster. Let it rip, kid.
Air Guys, God Bless the Ring. For a 3D arena fighter, Ehrgeiz is a pretty decent game. The controls could be a little less janky and stilted, but for the most part, it's serviceable. The big issue with this game, however, is its handling of the Final Fantasy VII cast. Ehrgeiz lets you play as Cloud, Tifa, Sephiroth, Yuffie, Vincent, and Zack, but there's just one big problem with all these guest characters. They all play the same and have moves that do not fit their characters whatsoever. Look, we can kind of see Tifa pulling off a suplex or pile driver, but Cloud or Yuffie locking someone in an armbar or headlock is something neither of them would ever do. Don't they all have large bladed weapons they can use instead?
Ready!
Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe.
The princess. Where is she?
Princess? Didn't I kill the last guy that called me that?
At the time, this was truly one of the most bizarre crossovers we had seen. Warner Brothers is really okay with seeing Scorpion roast Batman alive and Wonder Woman getting blown up to bits by Sonya Blade. Well, not entirely. While the awkward controls were enough to make this crossover unsavory, MKVDC's true claim to infamy was in how it baby-proofed all of the Mortal Kombat aspects. Tell us, what kind of a Mortal Kombat game would it be, crossover or not, if the finishing moves cannot have any blood or viscera on screen? Couple that with a story plagued by the lazy, worlds colliding and dooming each other stakes, and MKVDC proved to be much worse than it could have been.
If you are anything like Shao Kahn, you will find no refuge here. Your fate will be decided by the Elder Gods.
Nicktoons MLB.
You got mashed potatoes for a head.
Maybe you could use a little rest, Kirk.
Already, Nicktoons MLB is off to a horrible start just by premise alone. You want to make a video game where outlandish Nickelodeon characters are playing alongside realistic-looking Major League Baseball players? Okay, but what about this game makes it a Nickelodeon video game outside of just appearance? Well, nothing really. Only some of the roster has special abilities, and even if you want just a team of Nicktoons characters, the game won't let you do that. You can only choose 5. The ballparks don't even have anything interesting going on that isn't just visuals. It's just a bland mess made only for players who love baseball and Nickelodeon cartoons, not one or the other.
I think all the fans would agree with you.
Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Winter Olympic Games. The Mario and Sonic franchise is decent for the most part. They may only be mid-collections of minigames, but they can be entertaining to play once in a blue moon. As for Sochi 2014, this was the absolute worst entry in the entire franchise. Whereas the first Winter Olympics entry in the series was a fun introduction of the event, Sochi 2014 felt like just a soulless cash grab. Not only was the selection of events mundane and pretty much the same as the previous game, but the controls somehow got worse compared to the previous game. We're not quite sure how you pull that off, but ever since this entry, the Mario and Sonic games have suffered from a pretty middling reputation now, even after Tokyo 2020 made its way to Switch. PlayStation Move Heroes.
Something is afoot. I'd say no one is above suspicion.
No, it is not the last of the mundane minigame-centric crossovers, but as far as PlayStation is concerned, this was one of Sony's worst outings. PlayStation Move Heroes finally made our dreams come true by putting Sly, Jack, Daxter, Ratchet, and Clank, and Bentley into one game, teaming up to save their respective worlds from calamity. Unfortunately, this was not the epic adventure we had been hoping for. PlayStation Move Heroes turned out to be nothing more than a slew of boring platforming and combat challenges that for some reason could only be done with the PlayStation Move controllers, which barely worked half of the time. You really expect us to suffer through a handful of hours of broken controls and Sly looking gross as hell? Nah dude, send it back. PlayStation All-Stars was worth the wait compared to this.
Yeah, I'm up for a little friendly competition.
Or not so friendly. I'm in.
Cartoon Network Punchtime Explosion.
Versus Bill Gax. Versus Kevin E. Levin. 3, 2, 1, fight!
Speaking of Smash Bros. Copycats, Cartoon Network Punchtime Explosion made the right calls on which characters to include, for the most part. It's kinda confusing my chowder is in here, but whatever. Even though every character mirrored someone from Nintendo's famed fighting franchise, the sheer lack of originality wasn't the problem here, it was the lack of refinement. Punchtime Explosion's animations and physics were so out of whack that it makes the game look like a technical mess. Many of the animations look like they were only keyframed, while visual and audio effects often cut each other off randomly. Honestly, you'd think we were playing an alpha build with this game. Funko Fusion. While our previous entries were technical messes or simply failed in providing quality gameplay, Funko Fusion is, well, a mash of both problems and more. Here we have a game that wants to be a third-person shooter, but also a platformer, but also a puzzle game, but also a boss gauntlet, but also a collectathon, but also melee combat oriented, but also open world, if possible. While the game only saw minor visual bugs, Funko Fusion's biggest crime here, though, is the simple lack of direction and focus. And what better way to display that than the IP selection for this massive crossover? When you have IPs appealing to kids like Five Nights at Freddy's and He-Man, mixing in with more adult IPs like Hot Fuzz, The Thing, and Invincible, we gotta ask, who's your demographic? Spyro Orange, The Cortex Conspiracy, and Crash Bandicoot Purple, Ripto's Rampage. When it comes to crossovers between two specific video game IPs, both Spyro fans and Crash fans have a deep love and appreciation for each other. However, that same passion was not represented in Crash Purple and Spyro Orange. While both feature some 2D platforming gameplay, most of your time is spent playing uneventful minigames that somehow get Crash and Spyro to team up, foil their villain's plot. Yeah, nothing about these games makes any sense, and the sheer mundanity caused both fandoms to reject this fantasy we once desired. At least we've seen the two together in later, significantly better games like Skylanders Imaginators and Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. Jump Force.
ベジータは昔は悪いやつだったけど、今は違う。
What was to be the biggest celebration of Shonen Jump's history became one of the worst games we ever saw in 2019. Jump Force was the weirdest, and ugliest crossover game to have come out at the time. Why would you want your manga and anime characters looking as realistic as they are here? What was arguably worst about Jump Force wasn't the visuals or the bloated story, not even the lackluster level design. No, it was mainly the gameplay itself. This was a fighting game that required absolutely no strategy here. You could practically button mash your worries away, as every character had a light attack, a heavy attack, a dodge, a block, and maybe a ranged attack. It's a 3D arena brawler with absolutely no thought put into it. The only credit we can give it is how it managed to make Yugi a viable fighter against Goku. What's the worst video game crossover you've played? Did it make our list? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to MojoPlays for more great videos every day.